So it's collect requirements. So here, this is the process of defining and documenting stakeholders' need to meet project objectives. I explained this earlier. Please note, it's very important for you to understand that the project success is directly influenced by the care taken in capturing and managing project requirements and product requirements. You need to understand that if you make mistakes here, the mistakes will cascade down into the project. Simply because it is the requirements you are collecting that forms the scope of the project. It is the scope of the project that you have defined that determines the work you will do on the project, that determines the budget of the project, that determines the schedule of the project, that determines the resource need of the project, that even determines the stakeholders you will be dealing with on the project. So, if you do this in a faulty way, it cascades down. Requirements include quantified and documented needs. Please note this. When you are collecting requirements, you are not just going around taking meaningless stories, unmeasurable items, or things that are not quantifiable. Because when you collect requirements, you are accountable. You are accountable. So what it means is that you, at some point later in the project, you have to go back to your sponsor to go and defend what you have done. To go and defend what you have done. So, at this point here, you need to understand that when you are collecting requirements, you are collecting things you can defend, and you can only defend what you can quantify. So, beware of some adjectives that are meaningless. Beautiful. Excellent. What does beautiful mean? I want you to make it beautiful. If that's a requirement, it's not clear. So you need clarity. What do you mean by beautiful? What do you mean by excellent? Can you define it? Can you describe it? How do we quantify beautiful? How do we quantify excellent? Is there a particular scaling system that you could use to quantify? So whatever requirements you are you are collecting, try as much as possible to ensure that there are things that can be quantified. Because if you can't quantify whether you have achieved it or not, if you can't quantify it, how do you know whether you have achieved it or not? So requirements have to be quantified. Do all you can. Okay, let me give a personal experience. When I work on my projects and customers give me requirements that are not quantifiable, give me an excellent thing. Make it very, very something, What I do is, I ask, can you define what you mean by this? I cannot define it. I just know that it has to be good. Okay, good. What does good mean? Okay. I try to drill down to get some more details about it. And whatever I get, what I do is, I ask for, okay, can you give me examples of what you think are good in relation to what we want to achieve on a project? Have you come across a good one before? Let me see, do you have an example I can see? And then I review the example that the person gives to me. And then I write out my own definition of is good. Because if you say this is good, then definitely there should be some features in that thing that makes it good. So I try to extract those features and take it to the person. Mr. XYZ, you said this is good. I was able to extract the following description from what you gave to me. Does this define your good? The person says yes or no. If the person says yes, beautiful, then I have some quantifiable measure of the person's requirement. If the person says no, at that point in time, we'll refine those requirements again into proper quantifiable requirements. Please don't proceed on a project if you don't have quantifiable requirements. Because the whole idea of managing a project professionally is that you want to achieve customer satisfaction, is that you want to produce a quality result. And quality in this case means meeting customer requirements, meeting specification. You will never be able to get there if you are weak in collecting requirements, if you have collected the wrong requirements, if you have collected unquantifiable requirements. So what you want to do should be quantifiable, such that as you are working on the project, you are monitoring and controlling to ensure you are in line in the direction towards achieving that quantifiable requirement. If your requirement is not quantifiable, how do you want to move in its direction? How do you want to ensure you achieve it? Okay, so that's clear. Then it should be documented. The expectations of your stakeholders, the expectation of your sponsor, your expectation of your customer should be documented. In fact, it should, yes, documented. That's the word. It shouldn't just be, as much as possible, you should avoid taking requirements verbally. But even if you take it verbally, you should ensure you confirm that, okay, this is what the person said. Okay, the way I do it is, when I'm giving requirements verbally, what I do is, I do a documentation based on what you have said. I send it to the person, kindly confirm the following as the requirements we discussed. Because there should be a proof that this requirement is coming from this person. Part of the output of this thing is that, of this process, is you have something called traceability matrix, requirement traceability matrix. You want to be clear to know that this particular requirement came from this particular stakeholder. So you want to have things documented, well structured collection of requirements. So even when you receive requirements via non-formal means, you want to try as much as possible to get confirmation, to get documented, what's the word? You want to try as much as possible to get documented confirmation, yes, that yes, you got this from me. Simply because later on the project, when you are going for validation, you don't want to get into arguments to say, no, I didn't say that. No, that's not from me. You don't want to expend so much money and effort into working on a direction of a project that is wrong. So, even when you get your requirements, you want to be sure that you have gotten the right requirements. You want the sponsor and other stakeholders to confirm to you that yes, you're on track. So you want to have it documented very, very well. So requirements must be detailed enough to allow precise measurements when you're executing and then when you're monitoring and controlling. You need precise measurements when you're executing because you want to execute in direction of the precise measurements. When you're monitoring and controlling, you want to confirm that you have met the requirements. So, you cannot confirm whether you have met something that's not clear. You also cannot execute what is not clear. Okay? So this is a funny case study here. And it calls for caution that when you're on a project, it's not just enough to listen to the stakeholders when they are talking, when they are giving you requirements. It is very important for you to read between the lines. Understand what is behind what they are saying. Because a lot of times, customers themselves, stakeholders themselves, might not be able to give a full, proper description of what they want. So, you should be able to read between the lines to understand what exactly is the need leading to this? And that's one of the reasons why project justification is a key input into managing the project. You want to know the why. Because sometimes, even the stakeholders themselves might give you requirements that contradict the why, that don't put you in the right direction towards achieving the why of the project. So, and don't forget, proper success on a project is achieved when you meet customer expectation. So, even when the description is hazy, you have to keep drilling until you have the right requirements that will make you achieve customer satisfaction and customer expectation on the project. In collecting requirements, there are different tools and techniques. One of them is interview. Interview is meet with them either in a formal or informal approach. Ask questions, get feedback, get them to answer some questions, either in a structured or a semi-structured or unstructured form of interview. You have focus groups. So focus groups is a form of bringing in pre-qualified experts to come and guide you on a particular topic or a particular subject or whatever you're trying to work on. So you should discuss, you have questions. The difference between a focus group and interview is that you're interviewing one person. Focus group is you are bringing some experts together on a particular subject matter to learn from their experience, to understand the expectation and attitudes. So here, in this case now, you want to use focus groups to collect requirements. You are bringing stakeholders together and talking to a number of them at the same time. Interviews is majorly you are just talking to one of them at a time. So you could also have facilitated workshops. There could be cases in which it might not be realistic for you to meet all your stakeholders one by one. Are you able to bring all of them together? And then, you have cross-functional stakeholders coming together and then you're talking to a lot of them at a time. So you have some other things called group creativity techniques. So group activities organized to identify product and project requirements. Some of these things include brainstorming, nominal group technique, the Delphi technique. So all of these things are various ways. The central idea is you want to speak to as many stakeholders as possible. You want to understand their need. You want to pick correct requirements from them. So you could do this in different ways. Interviews, focus group, group creativity techniques, that is brainstorming, nominal group technique, and the Delphi technique. Okay, you also have mind mapping, then affinity diagram. All of these things are tools and techniques you could use when you want to collect requirements. Group decision-making technique. This is a group assessment of multiple alternatives with an expected outcome in the form of future actions and resolutions used to generate requirements, classify requirements, and prioritize product requirements. So, you are bringing a number of people together and you want them to be able to discuss some requirements you have on ground. You want to generate, you want to classify, you want to prioritize. So you're asking for opinion. So this could be in the form of, getting some unanimity, getting them to unanimously agree on some of your requirements. Or you could go with the majority. Or you could go with the largest block, plurality. Or you could use dictatorship. Maybe you have a particular boss amongst them who wants to just stamp his feet to say this is what we want. So outputs of this process, when you collect your requirements, you are documenting your requirements in a document called your requirements documentation. So here, you are progressively elaborating the content. Please note that collecting requirements, as much as it is done at the earlier part of planning, it's not one-off. You can continuously collect and refine the requirements that you have collected. So, This means that your requirements documentation, the document in which you are recording these things, is progressively elaborated. There are two reasons for you to understand why it's progressively elaborated. Number one, apart from the initial iteration of collection of requirements, you could also collect requirements as you move on the project. You see more need to collect requirements, you can go back and update the content of your requirements documentation. And also, for each requirement that you are collecting, there are other attributes of the requirements. There are other information about the requirements. So, as those information are getting available, you want to go back into a requirements documentation to update that requirement record in your requirements documentation. So that's why what is meant by saying is progressively elaborated. As at the time you are collecting requirements, the various fields or attributes of the requirement might not be available. In fact, will not be available. For example, as at the time you are collecting requirements, you cannot know whether that requirement will be accepted or it will be rejected. When we get to defining scope, we'll explain that there are times in which you have to step down some requirements because you are collecting requirements from numerous people. There will be cases of conflicts. So you might have to prioritize, you might have to, do it yourself or rely on some senior management to help you prioritization and much more. So what you put in your requirements documentation should be explicit, should be measurable, and should be accepted in writing as much as possible. So there are different things you put. For example, I just talked about the attributes of requirements. The business need, opportunity to be seized, project objectives for traceability, functional requirements, non-functional requirements, quality requirements, the acceptance criteria for the requirements, business rules, and the impact to other knowledge areas, impact to other entities inside or outside the performing organization. So it's quite detailed. What you have in your requirements documentation is quite detailed. And then support and training requirements assumptions, and constraints. So let's discuss the traceability matrix, requirements traceability matrix. This is a table linking requirements to their origin, to the source. So you want to be able to trace a requirement throughout the project life cycle. So it's a structure for managing scope changes. It provides a means to track requirements throughout the project life cycle. Yeah. So you have different attributes of requirement that you want to put in your traceability matrix. The identifier, that is a unique code for the requirements, the source of the requirement, the priority of the requirement, the current status of the requirement. So all of these things you want to put in your traceability matrix. So project need, opportunities, goals, objectives, the project scope or the WBS deliverables, product design, product development, test strategy and test scenario, high-level requirements to even more detailed requirements. So, depending on the kind of project you are working on, you could put in much more detail into your requirements traceability matrix. So, this is an example of a requirements traceability matrix. You can see that the central idea of this document is traceability. So you have different columns here: requirements, priority, category, source, how it relates to the objectives, and then how this requirement is manifested in your work breakdown structure deliverables. Then how do you do verification? How do you do validation? Please note, the biggest issue that arises when you are collecting requirements, if you do it inadequately, the biggest issues that could happen here are incomplete or incorrect. So you can collect it correctly, but not completely, and then you can now correct. You can even now collect your requirements in an incorrect way. All of these things have heavy consequences. Don't forget, I said it earlier, that the requirements are the basis for all planning. So failure in this area leads to failure in planning. Of course, when you fail to plan appropriately, there are some huge consequences, from budget issues with the schedule, to eventual project failure.